Jesse Guillen, who's going to be talking a bit about PrimeGov and logging on to PrimeGov and looking at the agenda and how to bring it up if you don't get a link. I'm going to be going through the rules of order that were sent out, as well as some basic motion training. So I guess the first thing I'd probably like to do is, Jesse, can you give I'm also on PrimeGov, but I'm going to let you do it. Will you give them a review of how to access PrimeGov? So this is anytime you don't receive a link, but maybe want to see the packet or can't, find the packet, this is the best way to grab the packet so that you have it all in front of you when we start our meeting. And so I'm going to have Jesse give you a tutorial about how to do that.
And then Jesse, before you get started, if I could just let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the YouTube later. It is a public meeting that we had to notice, so we can only discuss the procedures and the Roberts rules and the meetings information today. We cannot bring up any other items today. So if you have questions or other things pertaining to our upcoming meeting, please save that and ask that individually to staff later. And Jesse, I'm going to give you screen sharing. Okay.
So the link, and maybe Armenia can send this out to everyone. Actually, it's on the top of the agenda, I believe, is this public portal. And so this is where all of the meetings are located. And you'll see right here, we have the meeting that we're in currently. Since we don't have much of an agenda today, I won't use that as an example. I'll use Public Works as an example. So there are a few different options here. You have the HTML agenda, you have a PDF agenda, and then you have the full packet. So the easiest way I think to access it is you can just click on the HTML agenda, or you can do the HTML packet. It's pretty much the same thing. If you click on that, it's going to open up a new tab. And so it has all of the info here. It also has the link to that exact page right down here. And it has the full agenda here. You'll see on the left, we have all the attachments for the various items. So if we wanted to look at, let's say the minutes for this Public Works meeting, I click anywhere on the caption, and it's going to give me the packet material. So I can either choose to download it onto my computer, or the better option that I think is to just open it up in a new tab. And then you're going to be able to view that attachment.
Sorry, Jesse, I see Alma has a question, and I don't know if it's regarding this.
Yeah, my quick question was just if this is what it looks like for us as commissioners, or if this is also accessible to the public, and if it looks like this for them.
It's the same. So pretty much the only ones who have internal access are staff, governing body members, and I think planning commission members have internal access, but all the other committees just access it from the public portal. So I'm showing you exactly how you will access it.
Perfect, thank you.
You won't see these things on the left or this up top, but otherwise it looks exactly the same. So this is what the packet material looks like. This is what those minutes look like for that meeting. You can go into a different meeting. I can actually look for, let's see where let's go to your last meeting. So we can look at, the items that we discussed here. We can open that up and view that. So you can view it that way. Some people don't like how large this appears. You can shrink the size. Let's see if you can make it full screen by clicking this button. I don't know if you can see that down here, this button right here. You can make it full screen. Maybe it makes it a little easier to read. And that's pretty much how you view all of the material here. Are there any questions on that? Looks like there's one question, Armenia.
Let me just ask you, Jesse, can you show how we get to it through, if you just look up the city website? So to go through the clerks in
Sure.
case they can't find their link.
And I see Marcia has her hand up. Marcia, did you have a question you wanted to ask? You can unmute yourself. You're on mute.
Yes, thank you. This is just in relationship to getting to the website. And I think it's related to the question that was just asked by Andrea. And I would like to ask if the santafecom/public/portal will take me there, or do I have to go through the city?
No, you can access it from that from this portion of it. Yeah, it takes you directly to this page here. Once it loads. So that santafe.primegov.com/public/portal is the main site for all of the meetings, and then if they're in order of date. So obviously this meeting is occurring right now, so that's going to show up first. Once this meeting is over, then it drops down to the archive meetings. And you can go back and look at previous meetings as well. Look at their information. If you don't, for whatever reason, have this website, or you don't remember how to get there, if you go to the city's website, right down here in the center, it's going to take you directly to that site. And there are, looks like Pauline and Alma have their hands up. Pauline.
I would. Woo. Okay. Sorry, it was echo. We're in the same room. I would recommend using this as a bookmark. So any websites that you will go to frequently, if you bookmark it on your preferred web browser, that is just one shortcut. And it's a tip.
Alma, did you have a question?
I did. I was just wondering if this was standard for everyone. So like if we wanted to look up a city council meeting, this is the same process that every committee would go through? Or the same application, I guess.
Yeah, so every city committee, including advisory committees, joint committees, task forces, governing body, all of those are using PrimeGov. So for example, we have governing body down here. So if you clicked on HTML agenda for governing body, it would bring up their full agenda with all of the available packet material.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And the archive is the same. So all of the city committees, governing body, any of those also are archived at the bottom of the screen. And so you can look back on the dates and click on the committee. So for Arts Commission or Arts and Public Places, you could select those, go to the agenda and the minutes for the previous, for meetings beforehand.
Any other questions on this? It's fairly straightforward, I think, in terms of how to access and look at the material. If there are any items that are available for public comment, then this will be available up until I think 1 o'clock the day of the meeting, if depending on what time the meeting's at. So, for example, Public Works this evening has this option available, so the public are allowed to comment on these items.
I think
So if that's the case, then Armenia will look for those, compile them, and add them to the packet for your meeting. So you'll be able to, you'll see them in the packet.
And I think Marcia has her hand up for a question.
Yes, one last question. Where on this webpage, the city page, are the notifications for upcoming meetings?
They're all right here. This is all of the current and upcoming meetings. You'll see these notice of meetings. As you scroll down further, you see, we're getting into December meetings that people have published their
I
notice of
mean,
meeting.
for the public who wants to find out when the next meeting is for, say, the Arts Commission, is there a notice? It's that you have to go into the website to find it? Okay.
So there's a couple of, I think also a couple different answers to that. So on the city clerk's website, there's a weekly list of meetings that also links to PrimeGov. We also have a meeting list, but I don't think Arts Commission is on our calendar for meetings. I think that's, I could be wrong.
If we do have a scheduled meeting, that usually comes up on the front page under the meetings and agendas, I think, for the week, for the homepage of this, right there, meeting and agenda packets. That's where we used to be able to view those.
Yeah, I think to cut down on work from clerk's office, we link directly to PrimeGov now, as opposed to trying to fill it out ourselves. So that link does take you directly here, which provides all of the meeting notifications.
Am I recognized?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just asking for the public, because if we want more public engagement, this is sort of insider's knowledge. How does the public get notified about meetings that are pertinent to the city and to all the issues in the city?
So I think part of it, Marcia, sorry, I don't mean to jump in, is we let them know. So as commissioners, part of our duty is to reach out to our communities and invite them to meetings and things.
That's part of it. And then, I mean, this link here on the city's homepage, it's pretty front and center when you get on there, links directly to this page, which provides notice of all of the upcoming meetings. If there aren't any other questions, then I will let Andrea proceed with the Robert's Rules section.
Sounds good. Hello, Councillor Lindell. Okay, so starting off, I hope you all received this document, and I'm going to share my screen as we go through this. The city rules and procedures for city committees. So this was first adopted, as you see all the adoption, in 1984. The last time it was revised was in 2009. This introduction really talks about what these rules are. So we have two sets of rules in the city. We have the rules that govern the governing body meetings, and then we have the rules for city committees. So these were adopted by the governing body, and they state these are the following rules and procedures intended to serve as the guide for the committees. They're not intended to replace Robert's rules, but if there is a conflict between the committee rules, procedures, and enabling state statute or city ordinance with Robert's rules, then the statute or ordinance shall prevail. So if there's a discrepancy between Robert's rules and these rules will be the governing rules. If there isn't definition in these rules for something that exists, then we do look to Robert's rules. So I thought that was important to map out. Because the governing body has adopted this section of rules, that means that these are the rules that we do follow. There is a table of contents that hopefully directs you to how these rules work. So this talks a lot about the administrative procedures that goes through. What I'm going to focus on today is Article 10 and Article 11, unless anyone wants to go anywhere else. Sorry, I see a question with Paul.
Yeah, Uh, When I read this introduction, it says these procedures are not intended to replace Robert's Rules of Order. If there's a conflict between the committee rules and procedures, and I understand that to be rules and procedures that are adopted by the committee, and the enabling state statute or city ordinance, the statute or ordinance shall prevail. And this is a resolution. It's not an ordinance that was adopted by the governing body. So it seems to me, by its own terms, that the rules that in this case, the Art Commission would adopt, or Robert's rules, would be the primary rules. Am I wrong?
So I'm a little confused by your question. So it's an adoption, this resolution adopted policies and procedures that are followed by all of the city committees. It doesn't necessarily need to be an ordinance. A resolution creates policies for how we move forward in our city committees. So they face more inward. They govern how the committees run. That's why it's not an ordinance kind of based on how things are run outside of the city that govern the public. So that's the first thing. The adoption of these rules mean that all of the city committees in the city follow these rules. And if there is any conflict between them and Robert's rules, these rules are the ones that we follow.
Okay.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out what the question is beyond that.
Well, the question is this: the introduction talks about state statutes or city ordinance, and this is a resolution. And I don't understand. A resolution is something that's different than a city ordinance that I don't think has the same effect as an ordinance, and probably doesn't go through the same procedures. But there must be a difference, because you have a resolution and you have an ordinance, and I just don't understand the difference. And that really was at the root of my question.
So I think the enabling ordinance that we're talking about, and I will stop sharing the screen. So what the enabling ordinance is you have an enabling ordinance where the governing body created the Arts Commission. So that little ordinance that's small now, that we are trying to expand to have more detail, that ordinance has both the inaction of creating the Arts Commission, what that membership looks like, what the roles and responsibilities are, and that creates it as a city committee. So that's the structure of you are created as a city committee. The resolution on top of that is how the policies and procedures that govern the Arts Commission, any other committees that are in the city, all of those are governed by policies of how you move forward. So I think what it's talking about in the introduction is that there are certain statutes that create different things. So I'm trying to think of exactly, there's like the Economic Development Committee, you have economic development enabling statute, that you have LEDA funding, you have different funding sources that have to go through a specific committee in some ways. So industrial revenue bonds, they go through EDAC committee to then end up in the governing body's purview. So those are the enabling statutes that say we want you to have such a committee. The Open Meetings Act, also a statute that says all of these different committees, commissions, etc., are governed by the Open Meetings Act. Then you distill from there whether the city wants to have any procedures for how those committees, commissions, governing body are run. That's how we create this resolution that says this is how we want the internal policies to be run. You're exactly right. Resolutions and ordinances are very different in how they are enabled. And I'm actually going to let Jesse kind of go into the bill making process. So maybe we can flesh out how ordinances are created and resolutions are created and why they're differently created. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, let me just follow up on that. The Arts Commission ordinance, 6.1.1, creates the Arts Commission. And the last sentence of 6.1.1A says the commission shall organize and adopt administrative rules and procedures necessary to accomplish its purposes. So the ordinance creates the Arts Commission and also gives the Arts Commission the power to create its own rules and procedures necessary to accomplish its purposes. So the Arts Commission is, by the ordinance, is given the power to govern itself. And that would seem to take precedence over the guidance, the general guidance that was adopted by resolution. I guess I'd like to hear why I'm wrong on that.
Well, I don't necessarily think that, sorry, and I don't mean to step in, that she's saying you're wrong. I just think that what folks have mentioned is this is how other committees and other commissions are run, and this is the way the city is generally running most things. And if we want to do something out of lockstep with that, I think that's a bigger conversation than the rules and regs that we're generally learning.
I think that the answer is if you want to adopt your own rules that vary from all of these, they have to either be more explicit and follow this framework, but they can't be outside of this governance structure. So Robert's rules and the Open Meetings Act are kind of the overarching things. The city has adopted policies and procedures for the committees. If this committee wants to have its own policies and procedures that are further defined, they still need to be in those frameworks for those two sections. I mean, you could decide that the Arts Commission wants to have its very own rules and you could adopt it. But they still have to be in this purview. They have to be kind of under these rules, and they're not adopted by any other entity. So I think that's it. They would technically would be informal rules, because in order to be fully adopted, they have to go through the governing body process.
Okay, I understand your interpretation of that.
Okay. Jesse, do you want to give a further definition as to the difference between a resolution and a ordinance and how they move through the process?
Sure. So an ordinance code of
Jesse, are you there still?
yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you, kind of frozen, then you went lower.
Sorry, computer that knocks some wires. So bill is something that becomes an ordinance, which goes into the city's code. So it's a law. Essentially, a resolution is more of a statement of policy. It adopts rules or policies, establishes support for something, but it doesn't have the force of law. So the rules and procedures for city committees, the rules and procedures for the governing body are both adopted by resolution. All of our committees, with the exception of one, task force, follow our rules and procedures for the city committees that Andrea was discussing. And so in going back a little bit, so there's a discussion about if there's a conflict between the committee rules and procedures and the enabling state statute or city ordinance, the statute or ordinance shall prevail. That doesn't talk about anything about how the rules and procedures are adopted. They are adopted by resolution. It's just if there's a conflict between those and statute or ordinance, that statute or ordinance, since those are law, will prevail over the resolution. Any questions on the difference between a resolution, bill, ordinance? Okay, Andrea, continue.
That's good. Alma, I see you have a question.
Well, I'm a little concerned that we're getting in the weeds, and I do want to kind of stick to the basics of how we're going to be running our meetings and like conducting business. But I think that if this is something we want to address and talk about changing and creating our own rules and regs, that we can have a separate meeting. But I definitely don't want to get too caught up with that.
So unless there's any further questions about the introductions section, I'm gonna move to Articles 10 and 11. So Article 10, let me bring it up. Article 10 specifies the difference between a regular meeting and special meetings. And so you have established through requesting a calendar, regular meetings set starting, I think, in December, once a month for the next year. Special meetings can be called if there's an emergent thing that we need to discuss, or, you know, during COVID, we basically were having special meetings if there was something that we needed to discuss. So these are the rules of how to do those meetings. They're all subject to the quorum requirements and the Open Meetings Act. So Section 4 talks about the majority of the regular committee members shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of official business. We've talked a lot about quorums and rolling quorums, and you are a Arts Commission of 9. I can't remember if all 9 positions are filled. Armenia, are they?
We currently have 7, I believe.
Okay. So we have 7 arts commissioners, which means that a quorum currently of your arts commissioners would be 4 individuals talking about any public business. So when we have our meetings, if there are 4 members, we are able to move forward and make decisions. Open Meetings Act, we talked a little bit about this, I guess, at the first onboarding, how the Open Meetings Act runs and what that means, that interacts with the quorum issues, that anything that is public business. So right now you're talking about moving forward with an ordinance and resolution. So any of that discussion that would be done with more than 4 people or 4 people or more would constitute a quorum. And so that needs to be, that's why we have you in groups of 2 or 3 to kind of do written, to talk about the ordinance, ask questions. If you want to, as a group of how we've parsed you together, you want to go through reviewing any type of changes to the document and talk about those. You can do those in your groups, but once you start adding more members, that's when we have a rolling quorum that's going. Sorry, Jesse, I see you have a question.
Just one thing, from what I heard is that there are 9 spots, but 7 members currently. So 5 would actually be a quorum, because even though there are 2 vacant spots, they're still counted in the total number of members in the committee. So a quorum would be 5 actually. That came up in a different committee. So.
Oh, okay. So even though we have 2 vacant spots, we still always have to have 5 to start a meeting to do any, conduct any business. Okay. Thank you. I've asked Jesse to correct me anytime I am wrong, because he definitely deals with this more often than I do. Hi, Alma. I see you have a question.
Yeah, just a quick clarifying question. So in our procedures, in our rules and regs, we have said that any more than 3 is a rolling quorum, but we have just said that only 5 creates a quorum. So what is the quorum, or are those different?
So it's not more than 3. So I was thinking more than 4, but as Jesse is talking about that you're a membership of 5, I'm going to have to check the Open Meetings Act, because I actually think it's a rolling quorum is a majority of the membership when it comes to business not being conducted, but I have to make sure that that is correct or not. Jesse, do you have further on that?
I can look it up right now and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. So because Open Meetings Act is really the overarching statutory authority about how the public conducts business in meetings, that's always going to be the go-to as to what is the, I guess, the right answer in some ways. So we'll look at that and get back to you, Alma. Thank you for the question. Article 11, I wanted to talk about voting privileges. So committee members shall have the privilege of voting on matters or questions before the committee. So the manner of voting shall be conducted in a manner a majority of the members shall constitute a quorum. That's why we're asking this. So at an Arts Commission meeting, 5 of you have to be present to vote on any matters that come before you as business. Each member, excluding the chairman, shall have 1 vote. And so this has actually been talked about a lot recently in some of our meetings. So that the chairman may vote only in a case of a tie when his or her vote will provide the necessary number of votes required by law for taking action on an issue before the committee. Otherwise, the chairman does not vote on any matters. When a quorum is present at any meeting, the voting of a majority of the members present shall decide on any questions brought before such a meeting, except when extraordinary majorities are required as determined by the Roberts Rules of Order. So there are certain issues, and these usually arise at the Planning Commission level, the Historic Board level, and the governing body level, because there are certain land use matters that require a supermajority, like a variance requires a majority to pass certain things forward. So it has to be not the majority of those present, but the actual majority of the full group or the commission. So under these rules, telephone polls or proxy voting are not a valid measure of voting. We're in the Zoom world, and we have had guidance by the Attorney General's office that this constitutes us meeting in person, and so voting can happen. But normally, if we are in person and someone is voting via a telephone poll, we're not allowed to do that. So those are the voting measures. I want to switch to, unless we have any questions, I wanted to switch to, I see Pauline has a question.
I just wanted to clarify that because that's regarding the voting, which is new information, that the chair does not vote unless it's a tiebreaker. And is that what we should be following?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we sent you a link. Oh, sorry, Anna, you have a question.
Oh, I just wanted to see whether tiebreaker, yes, needed to make a quorum, yes?
So that's a good question. So I think the chair constitutes a quorum, but when it comes to voting, they only vote.
We need a quorum to do business, right?
Yes.
So therefore, if you're voting on something, you need 5 or whatever we determine this number is to be the quorum. You might need the chair's vote in that case. Otherwise, how do you resolve that? That's what I'm questioning.
So I believe so, but so say you have 5 people and you're voting on an issue, and the chair calls the vote. If all 4 of you agree, then the chair doesn't need to vote. If you have a tie between 2 of you disagreeing and 2 of you agreeing, then the chair would vote to make sure to move that forward or deny that motion. So there has to be a quorum in order to move forward with business. But when it comes to voting, it's only, I think that's what it means by the tiebreaker issue.
Well, just to clarify, item C says when a quorum is present at any meeting, the vote of a majority of members present shall decide the questions brought before the meeting. So if you have 2 and 2 and 1 doesn't vote, that means the
chair has to
the
vote.
chair has to vote. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Marcia?
Thank you. I guess I'm still a little confused. If we have 4 people present that constitute a quorum and the chair normally does not vote. I mean, do we have to have 5 members of the board or the commission present in order to take a vote? Or does that mean that we can have 4 members of the commission present and the chair would then constitute the 5th member? I'm confused.
So you need 5 members to do any business. And so that includes the chair.
It includes the chair, even though the
Yes.
chair does not normally vote.
Yes.
Okay,
So the chair isn't included from the quorum. The chair is really not included in the voting unless it breaks the tie. Sorry, Jesse, I see your hands raised, so.
I think we're trying to conflate 2 different issues. One is a quorum, which is 5 people. The other is voting, where the chair only votes in the case of a tie. So those are 2 separate issues. I don't know if that helps it. I think if you think about them as separate issues, then it might make it less confusing.
that's helpful. Thank you. Because that is exactly what was happening in my brain.
Paul, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I just took a quick look at the Open Meetings Act, and it said all meetings of a quorum of the members of any board, commission, and so on are declared to be meetings, public meetings open to the public at all times. So I think that, I guess, means that in terms of our rolling quorum and the things that we've talked about, a meeting of 4 of us would not be under the Public Meetings Act.
Yes, it'd be 5.
The quorum is 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4 is not a public meeting.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. So sorry, any other questions before I jump to the Robert's Rules link so we can go over motions? Rod?
So just to make sure, so I can confirm everything, if rolling quorum currently exists now with our 7 members, if it's 4 or more, correct? And under a normal quorum, if we have a full committee of 9, that goes up to 5. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I think
I'm just trying to avoid rolling quorum now so that we clarify what that ceiling is.
so the quorum, as read by the Open Meetings Act and discussed by Jesse, is 5 since there's a membership of 9. So even with only 7 members, it's still a quorum constitutes 5. So if we sit in Arts Commission, we have to have 5 members present in order to move any public business forward.
And Rod and Pauline, I think what confused us before was when we did not have commission members and we didn't have a quorum of 5. They changed that to where we lowered the quorum amount because we only had 5 members at one time. And that's where it changed that. But now because we're becoming a full committee again, I think that's where we're going back to the 5 makes a quorum.
Okay. So I think the first discussion point is kind of the nomenclature of meetings. So we have a chair and we have a vice chair. Our current chair is Alma, our vice chair is Anne. They can be addressed. So when we start a meeting, everyone can be addressed as arts commissioners or commissioners. The chair and vice chair can be addressed by their nomenclature, and the chair is the one who's running the meeting. So everything should be directed towards the chair. That means that if you have a question, you raise your hand, wait to be acknowledged by the chair, and then move forward with asking your questions. If Alma is not here and becomes as the vice chair, she will be the chair of the meeting. So those are the first kind of procedural things. So anytime we're going through our agenda, the agenda will be moved forward by the chair in the meeting, going through each identifiable item. Since we are in the Zoom world format, we will be doing voice votes. So when we're in person, normally you can raise your hand and say, to say you're present here. Armenia will be the one who is running through everyone's name so that we can do a roll call vote. So every person has to vocalize, yes, I'm here, present, or how you are voting. So those are kind of the overarching procedural questions. The next thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was the portion of this link that I sent out talking about the 6 steps of a motion. And so I think these are some really good, helpful tips. So every motion has 6 steps to it. This is what I was saying. The chair will recognize a member. The member will either raise their hand or signal. So in this, we have the raise hand function, but you also could say, chair, unmute yourself and say, chair, I'd like to make a motion. The chairperson will acknowledge you. You'll make your motion. Every motion, in order to move forward, has to have a second. So another commission member will second that motion if it's going to be moved forward. The chairperson will restate the motion so everyone knows what motion is on the table. Once there is a motion on the table, you can debate that motion, meaning that's when you will start discussing the merits of the motion, what you think you'd like to talk about. So for example, if you have a motion to move an ordinance that's changing your rules, you can make that motion to adopt, but maybe with an amendment. And so the amendment, you will address what that amendment is and talk about that. Once there is a second, then you can debate whether that amendment is something that you would like to move forward. Sorry, go ahead, Jesse.
One note on the second, the person who seconds it, the member who seconds it, doesn't necessarily have to agree with the motion. The second could be just to start the discussion, because if there's no second, then the motion fails and there's not going to be any discussion. So they can do it just so that there can be discussion on the item.
And you can address that if you choose to say I'm seconding this so we can have discussion. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
When you mentioned amending the motion, could you go over that again? I didn't quite follow that.
So if there's you can either move something forward, like we're moving this document forward, and then you start discussing it, and in debate, you could have motions that arise, or you could make a motion to accept something with an amendment saying, this amendment is what I'd like to move forward. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse. Normally we deal with moving either an ordinance or resolution forward by having the motion on the table in the second, and then sometimes we address the motions, or you could make a motion to accept a certain resolution or ordinance or discussion item with an amendment itself. It could go either way. Is that correct?
So the way Robert's rules works is that there's always supposed to be a main motion on the floor. So that could be approval, denial, something like that. And then if there's an amendment to it, that would be a subsidiary secondary motion. So, you could move to approve resolution X, someone seconds it, and then someone else says, well, I would like to amend the resolution to do X, Y, and Z. So if that amendment is adopted, then the main motion then becomes move to approve as amended, because it is then been amended. But there always has to be that main motion on the floor before you talk about any amendments or changes to it.
Okay, so it either has to be a motion to approve or deny before the amendment is made. Go ahead, Paul.
So if there's a motion that's been seconded, then another member can at that point move to amend, and then the amendment is if needs to be seconded, and then there's a discussion on that. And if that's approved, then that becomes part of the main motion that then becomes the subject of discussion and a vote.
Yes, but we still have to articulate the motion. So in that pattern, and this does happen at governing body often, but in that pattern, there's a main motion to approve, second, and then a motion to amend with a second. There'll be discussion on that amendment. And if that amendment, then you vote on that amendment. So that's one section. You'd go through the discussion, debate, and vote. And then if that amendment moves forward, meaning it's approved, then the vote on the main motion would be move to approve with the amendment. And so then that would be another vote that you would have, that you're moving that piece of legislation or whatever it is as amended, and then the entire group votes on that as well.
Okay.
So going through this, we're in this debate process, the vote, then the chairperson will announce the vote. So whether the vote moves forward, meaning the motion to approve the legislation as amended is approved, that will be announced. This is a really great tip that, I use often, is if there isn't anyone objecting to a motion, then you can say, hearing no objections, the motion is approved. So we do these, this is normally really great in person. Because we're doing Zoom and Armenia does the roll call, you'll basically state how you are. You're either saying no or yes to the motion. But when we're in person, I think this is a good tip to moving forward, because we can acknowledge one another via, raising our hand or saying yay or nay. So these sections here are a little bit more focused into rules of order. So requesting points of something, a point of order, a point of information, a point of inquiry, a point of personal privilege. These kind of really get into the underpinnings of when a motion is actually on the table or when you want to correct the procedures that are happening. So point of order draws attention to a breach of the rules. So basically, if we were on the motion and I made a motion to amend, Jesse could say, point of order, the main motion needs to be on the table before you amend the motion. That would be a clarification as that was an improper procedure. So let's move forward with the proper procedure. Points of information. So a member may need to bring up additional point or additional information so that the other members can make a fully informed votes in the form of a non-debatable statement. So I think what that means is it's a fact that maybe not everyone knows. And so you want to give that information so that the vote, it's a fully informed vote that occurs. Point of inquiry. So these are things that you would call out while you're in the midst of a motion or why something is happening. There's a motion on the table, you would, say chair, point of order, or chair, point of inquiry. Point of inquiry, a member may use a point of inquiry to ask for clarification in a report to make better voting decisions. I haven't really seen that used as often. I'm not necessarily as familiar with that. Point of personal privilege. A member may use a point of privilege to address the physical comfort of the setting, like temperature or noise, or maybe they can't hear. That might happen on Zoom. If we can't hear you, you could say point of personal privilege. I can't hear, Marcia speaking. And so if she can turn up her volume, or I didn't hear that motion, or the actual room, if we're all together in a room, that can also be utilized. So this is a good cheat sheet as how to say these things. Main introduction, I move. And this chart just goes down with how you move through this. I think I would like to ask you if you have any questions about this chart or would like to discuss anything further. I know you can go through the chart on your own, and so I don't want to take up too much time going through it when I know you're fully capable of doing that. So I want to be able to give you some time for questions. I know we're ending at 2, so we have about 8 minutes for any questions. Go ahead, Paul.
I didn't see the chart. I may have missed it in the materials that you sent. I thought that was very helpful. Where do we get it?
So there's a link that I sent you that's the Robert's Rules of Order cheat sheet. So if you click on that, the chart is part of that. You just have to scroll down. I think we also have a PDF of this chart, but I think it's a shorter chart than this. So the one that's on the website.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The one that's on the website is better. There is a smaller version of the chart in the document, but the website link that's included on the Word document will give you all of that information.
Any other questions? Sorry, Paul, you have another question?
Yeah, how do, are we limited to things that are on the agenda, or if there's something that isn't on the agenda that we want to discuss, how do we do that?
So yes, we are limited to what is on the agenda. The Open Meetings Act requires that our agendas post everything that will be discussed at the public meeting. If there is ever something that you would like to add, there is a section on our agenda that's, you know, for chair people. You could always write Armenia and say, listen, I would like to add to our agenda that I'd like to talk about this specific item before we hold a meeting. It has to be noticed 72 hours before our meeting. So you have to get it to her, make sure and get it to her within 72 hours before the meeting. It would be better if you do it when she's posting the agenda. So I think she posts it. Normally our meetings are on a Wednesday, is that right?
They're stated for a Monday evening, so I would need that at the latest, I would say by Wednesday before, just because that gives me enough time to post it with that 72-hour requirement.
And so what she could do is under that section of items, I'm just want to make sure I know what it's called.
There is also a section on the agenda, not to change, you know, the agenda for that specific meeting, but if you want something on an agenda going forward, there is a section from matters of the committee.
Yes.
And that's where you can state what you would like to have presented or discussed at the next meeting and can be added to the agenda. And that's at the bottom of every agenda.
Go ahead, Pauline.
And I would say for procedure wise, the agenda drafts are given to the chair and vice chair. So if any other commissioner would like something else that is added, instead of going to Armenia, I would refer them to go to the chair and vice chair. So that could be added to the agenda.
Okay.
So point of order on that.
Yes, the chair is really in charge of the agenda. That is the main focus. Armenia is publishing the agenda and doing she is the staff liaison who puts everything together. Well, do you have another question? Pauline?
Just for point of clarification, I know early on you mentioned how to reference, how to run the meetings as far as how to refer, use the nomenclature. So I just wanted to confirm that we're using chair, I don't know if chair, vice chair, commissioner, but do we want to be super formal and say by last names, Chair Castro, Vice Chair Wrinkle, Commissioner Mikulak? Or do we want to go, do we have to go by last names or first names? Does it matter? And is that the decision by the chair and vice chair to make that determination?
You know, that's a good question. I don't actually know the formality as to whether you're supposed to use last names or first names. I'll have to get back to you. I think, Messi, I see that you have your hand raised.
Well, I don't know, Jesse could maybe answer this. In my experience, it's usually the last name, which is the formality of, you know, like in citations. I don't know, Jesse, what do you say?
I'm trying to find it. I don't know if that's part of Robert's rules or not. But in practice, it is usually the title and then the last name. So Mayor Weber, Councilor Lindell, you know, Commissioner, Member, and then the last names. That's what it's been in practice. I don't know if that's necessarily a rule though.
Yeah, that's what I'm uncertain about. I don't know if there's a formality rule of how you address. I think we can say commissioner and use your last name. I mean, I think the other question is, how do we address staff members? I know that personally, I tend to be a little bit more informal, definitely calling Erminia Rod and Pauline. But technically, you know, it is Director Kamiyama. So those are things that we could definitely write out and send to you so that you can, you know how to address each one of the staff members. But I do think that fluctuates. Even I see it in meetings, you know, sometimes I'm called Andrea, sometimes I'm called Assistant City Attorney Andrea, so, or Salazar, it just depends. Go ahead, Paul.
I think it would be helpful if you sent us, a procedure. And I think being, as a matter of respect, probably to, have the same procedure for everybody. I tend to be informal, but, and I think in some of our previous meetings, we've kind of jumped around on this, but it would be my preference to have something to be consistent among all of us. We defer to you on how we do that, or at least I would.
That makes sense. And I think historically, the Arts Commission and a lot of our commissions have been incredibly informal when communicating with one another. And so I think that there's been a focus on, focusing on the formality of the rules and creating a procedure so that all meetings are run similarly. And, it does best benefit everyone, but I do want to make sure that no one ever feels prevented from speaking if they, use the wrong nomenclature. So that, I think, formality is great, but it shouldn't prohibit anyone from speaking up or making a request.
We'll do our best.
I see a couple of hands. Messia.
Yeah, I agree with Paul that there should be some kind of like standard way that we address each other, whether it's with our last name and the title of commissioner or whatever, just so that everyone knows how to do it. There was someone who didn't know anything about the Robert's Rules of Order, which was a really important point, that people who sit on commissions or positions of, quote, power have a kind of secret language that we all speak, and it's not good. So I know I'm used to being called Dr. Mikulak, and I'm not considered a lay person because of my position. It doesn't really matter in the context of the broader meaning. What matters is that we all get on the same page. and make it easy for us to have an interchange. That's my sense. Thank you.
In our last meeting, and I think it led to this session, which I think has been really good. Rashawn was, expressed that he felt, unsure of how to proceed. And so I think making some simple rules that everybody could follow could, make it easier for people to speak up. So we're all on the same page. And frankly, I was a little, confused about how to, refer to folks because we want to show each other and everybody, we want to show respect. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Sorry, Rod. I see you have a question. I was gonna say, so we're gonna be ending soon. I'm gonna take Rod's and then I think we should, sorry. And if you want to be next, and then I think we'll close out our meeting time.
Yeah, I'll just be really brief. Maybe it's important that we also, like, with that chart that we're sending out for the cheat sheet, we have a list of all of the formal titles that everybody's going to have so that we have a cheat sheet for our meetings. Because again, just to make everybody feel better, I'm going to be the one setting the lowest bar here. So it's going to be fine, believe me. And I think it's also important to note that Rich Brown is offered to help us have a stenographer paid to be in these meetings as well. So we're going to have a formal stenographer back in, and they're going to be helping. Like, that's been their job historically in past meetings for me, was keeping me into the Robert's Rule of Order and making sure that things flowed. That was the most important part of it for me, for their presence. And so I feel like once we have that officially reinstated, it's going to make and that person will be on our November meeting. So it's going to be from that. And once we get more regulated and have that as well, and I think Alma and Ann are going to keep us in line too, I think we're going to be fine with the cheat sheet. So just know that, there are people who are going to be doing worse than any of you.
And just to emphasize, since I've been here, the Arts Commission had been very informal. And so this is one of our ways to professionalize the meetings while at the same time making it accessible, because it is our goal to recruit a very diverse range of arts commissioners. So it's really doing better onboarding on our part and providing these types of trainings and materials to make available. So we'll send out the packet again. This time we'll have the nomenclature of how to refer to everybody with enunciations so that, we get those right. Because I think pronouncing somebody's name is very critical, at least to me. So Andrea and Jesse, thank you so much for your time. And again, if commissioners, if you have any other questions, please direct those to Armenia, and we will continue to get more information out to you. So again, we thank you for your time. This is recorded, so you can always go back to it. And we'll send the link out as well.
I also just wanted to add, to not make it a barrier. If you have a question in a meeting and you don't know how to formally ask it, I think it's appropriate to say, Chair, this is what I'd like to be doing. I want to have a motion that has an amendment. How do I do that? I think that's always fine to ask. So at the end of the day, we're all here to learn and experience together. And so please, I will state that at our meeting in 2 weeks, I think. But I think that's important, is that we don't always remember these. We have daily lives that have lots of different things going on in them. And so you're not going to always remember, the points of order of Robert's rules, and it's perfectly fine to ask. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Reminder meeting next Monday.
And a few of us are going to stay on the same Zoom. Is that correct?
I'm just going to stop the recording portion now.